One of the biggest conversations in command land over the last, really since Sunday, but even going back to last week is like, oh, they're 4-1, now 4-2, but they proved they could go toe-to-toe to an extent with a team like Baltimore is, should this team be buyers at the trade deadline? And so that question, of course, is really one that's more interesting for Adam Peters. I certainly have some thoughts on it. I'm sure Dan Quinn does too. And, I can give you mine in a second, but let's hear from Quinn. Because he was asked about this today and asked if, there's any acceleration to what they're building because of how they've started this season.
Right. That's a good question for Adam, but we talk about the team all the time, so although there's a deadline, it doesn't mean there's a, time that you have to, begin that. And so we spent a lot of time on the roster and the team, and you're right that we did get banged up into some spots, and that's why we are fortunate that the practice squad is bigger, than it was years ago. And you guys can remember that when, there was 4 players, and then the street list was different, and you went through that. But now there's I feel like a really good developmental plan of people that are in the building and practicing and playing. And so when those opportunities come up to go deliver, and although people may have not played a lot of reps, they get their chances. And you probably heard me say it before, but J-Mac is certainly the one that comes to mind for me of when his number was called, you get ready to deliver. And that's just such a pure example for us.
I think it's interesting to hear Quinn say that. One, because he doesn't say anything about, we are definitely going to go and acquire someone in a trade. Please call Adam Peters at insert number here. Like he doesn't say that. Which makes all the sense in the world. You don't want to appear desperate. That's a bad place to be in trades. He doesn't explicitly say that they won't do that, but he points to the practice squad and the internal nature of things. And that is also, to me, a very coachy type of answer where it's like, hey, we got more guys that I'm excited to see what they can do. And the reality is those guys on the practice squad probably aren't that different from a lot of the guys that are on the end of the roster. The problem is the guys who are the backups, the 2s, are not as good as the 1s. And that is where the biggest drop-off is in the NFL. Not from the 2s to the 3s necessarily, or the 3s to the 4s, although sometimes the 3s to the 4s on training camp, you're like, oh, that guy's an NFL player, and that guy's not. So there is some of that, like, oh, practice squad. But there's, I think, a lot of players around the NFL that if they're put in the right situation, that they're on a practice squad now, like they could be a part of the rotation at the back end. The problem is when those guys have to play real minutes, and guys above them who are your middle class of the NFL, your mid-tier player who is very solid backup, probably a little overexposed as a starter, has to play starters minutes. And sometimes it's just a young player like Johnny Newton who's not quite ready for that yet, who's still, didn't have a training camp basically, been banged up, in and out. Now he's in his 6th week as an NFL pro, and in terms of game weeks, and now he's going to have to be a starter, and he's going to get a lot of attention. And is he ready for that? So these are the things that as a coach, you can say like, oh, I'm excited about this guy's opportunity. And I have no doubt that they are because they invest in those guys. They put time in and they want to see what kind of return they can get. And occasionally you get that. Occasionally you have Jeremy McNichols come in and play so well that he winds up getting more snaps when the guy that he replaced was healthy again. But much more often, and especially these veterans that they're bringing in, guys like a Sheldon Day. Like Sheldon Day's been around. He's a known commodity. There's only so good he's going to be. Hopefully he can do a replacement level job. That'd be a win. I don't expect him to go out there and have a 9-sack season, which is kind of what you were hoping for from John Allen. It's just not going to happen. But if he can, hold his gap in the run way more times than not, get a little bit of pass rush juice and not just get blown off the ball, and spell Johnny Newton that Newton can have a 6.5, 7-sack season. Okay, well now we're talking. They can win with that. So from the internal, like, yes, that is absolutely something that you're working on doing. But Adam Peters' job, as hear Dan start that answer, like it's a better question for Adam. As a coach, you're ever like, hey, Adam, please go find someone.
No, because I don't, get into, the what ifs and where we're at. The thing that we spend, the time on it. Hey, is there anything that's stressing you? Is there, a spot that we need to address and go through? So that's really more where our time's spent. But you're right. There's a lot of people around this time of year that get calls, give calls, all of that. And I think that's just kind of part of this time.
I think philosophically, you're always going to give the same answer. We'll make the move that's best for the team. I think the unspoken part of that, the part that's fun to talk about on radio shows, honestly, it's probably kind of fun to talk about in internal meetings. Although their conversations have actual consequences and ours are for entertainment, is what that means. Like, what is best for the team? And I think with the way Jayden's playing, what's best for the team is to not waste a year. Hey, Jayden was playing as a top 5 quarterback in the first year of his rookie contract. And, we didn't think that was going to happen. And then we got a couple of injuries. So we just punted on the season and we just kind of kept trucking. Like, no. And this kid's going to play at this level. Like, you owe it to him and everybody else around to see how good you can be. Now, you don't need to sell out for this year. You don't need to trade 3 first-round picks for someone. Like, go pry someone away for a stupid price. Like, no, that's also silly. You can do both. But I think you are maybe more willing to give up a second or a third or a future whatever. Like, if your 2026 second you held in a certain esteem because you're like, we're still going to be rebuilding, or even your 2025, or your 2026. Yeah, I would say even your 2025, right? Next year's pick, your second round pick. You're like, that pick's going to be a top 10 pick in the second round. There's no way we can trade that. But now you're like, that pick could be late, in the 20s of the second round. It's different conversation. Worth something that's a little bit different. And so I think that you have to say, we'll do what's best for the team, but what's best for the team might be willing to give up or being willing to give up something a little bit heavier to get a better player that helps you now and in the future, as opposed to just holding on to your draft picks and maybe even selling for some draft picks at the deadline. And Dan Quinn was asked directly about this today, because once you get the franchise quarterback right, everything else changes. It has to. It simply has to. And Jayden Daniels being clearly the right guy means your clock on his rookie contract, the best bargain in sports, starts now. So when you get that franchise QB right in the draft, what does it mean for your team starting immediately?
Well, yeah, I think everybody, that's the name of the game, to say at a position that, affects the outcome so much, decision-making and processes to go. There's so much that goes into it. And so for me, getting a chance to be around excellent quarterbacks and seeing what it looks like and knowing that we have an excellent quarterback here, it's fantastic. I would say the common thread on that is relentless work ethics. And I've seen it with Jayden and going back through Dak and Matt and on the way down the line. That is a trait that definitely sticks out to me. There's just so much preparation that can go, and finding the right balance of decision-making, competing, knowing, making the plays go right, speeding up throws. It doesn't just get seen on just the way he's throwing it. It's in the way that he's playing the position. And oftentimes things that don't show up on the stat sheet are really a big deal. Dirting a ball that's in a 2-minute that wouldn't go for anything. That was an incomplete. Well, it was actually a really good play that, like we didn't do a hell of a lot of coaching on. It was like him being like really smart to go nail that. So those are some of the traits that it does. And it definitely, knowing that person's there and fighting shoulder to shoulder with you. I love Jayden, what he brings to us, and I can't wait to see him grow, man. He is absolutely relentless about it.
And that's why it works. It's not just a kid who's had a great start, the greatest start in the history of the league at the position, and is like, I've made it. I'm cool. Like, he's pissed after the Baltimore game. He doesn't like losing. That's going to drive a lot of winning around here. And it's up to the organization to make sure that they're on that. Now, that doesn't mean be irrational. It doesn't mean go trade all willy-nilly. It doesn't mean go all in for this year. But certainly don't want to waste a year. The league is too fragile. And I think these guys know that. These guys know that just because you're good now doesn't mean you're good next. They've had a couple of down years in San Francisco, or disappointments in San Francisco. Obviously, DQ gets to the Super Bowl, and then that's the peak in Atlanta, is that 28-3 lead, and it's literally all downhill from there. There are no guarantees. If you have a shot, you should make sure that you make the most of it. But also, with a quarterback at the beginning of his career and knowing you have multiple years left on this rookie deal, and a bunch of big decisions to make, you don't want to put yourself in a corner either. So there's a fine balance. Adam Peters is fully aware of that, and I'm sure that they will do what they think is best. And unlike a lot of previous regimes, I actually trust them in that judgment of making the decisions that will actually turn out best for the team.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.